Good day, mates. My name is Mordecai, and welcome back to the show, where a relatively inexperienced roleplayer narrates various RPG-related stories as a learning tool. Sometimes, getting into a new hobby can seem like an especially daunting task, even when one gets support from others within the hobby. And with getting into tabletop role-playing games, it can feel like a literal dice toss trying to find the right group or to get a group established. The good news is that there is a strong possibility of finding a group that works for each player in that group, with fun times and a cohesive experience in equal measure, with each member of the party getting good roleplay moments and being able to flourish. These are the types of games that should be the standard. So, naturally, there are groups out there that are noteworthy for how bad they are for new players, with the prospect of constant bullying or belittlement bordering on the psychotic. These are the types of games that don't encourage genuine or earnest moments for the new player, and run the risk of permanently discouraging them away from the hobby entirely. So what kind of toxic mess does our intrepid poster find in today's narration? Let us find out together as we embark on another delve. Before we get started with the narration, if you like my content and want to see more of it, be sure to subscribe and like the video. It's free, and you can always change your mind later. Enjoy! Let's delve into the often terrifying world of r/RPG horror stories. Today's story is titled, My First Attempt at D&D Was Almost My Last, and is written by user Ordertail. I recently discovered this subreddit and was immediately reminded of my first attempt at playing D&D. I'm not good at concise writing, so apologies in advance for the long story. This story takes place a few years ago when I was 18 or 19. I was a student and had recently seen my entire college friend group blow up due to some middle school level clique drama targeted at me. It was so bad I had to break my lease and move to a different apartment. In an attempt to pick myself up and do something besides school and work, I decided I wanted to finally try out Dungeons and Dragons. I had some friends play in the past, and it seemed like it would be right up my alley. I looked around for any sort of local group, but I couldn't find any active groups. Eventually, I took to the internet to search for an online group instead. This was my first mistake. After a while, I found a post from a guy, let's call him the DM, looking for a few extra players to round out a group for a campaign he wanted to start. I sent a message in which I explained that I was a beginner, but I had started listening to a few D&D podcasts and reading up about the rules, and I was eager to learn. The DM assured me that this was fine, that he had played with beginners before and invited me to join. He told me as a DM he prioritized role-playing and creativity, and he was excited to help me learn. I was thrilled. In my mind, this was exactly what I needed. A group of like-minded people with similar interests to me, meeting up regularly to chat and have fun, pretending to be magic and fighting dragons. The DM also informed me that we would be playing on Fantasy Grounds Virtual Tabletop, so I had some things to download, and he sent me a link to the Discord. I joined, but there wasn't much conversation going on. The DM told me that he was still looking for one more player, so I wasn't too surprised. Meanwhile, I got another email from the DM asking what I was thinking for characters. The conversation went like this. From my end, I'll probably lean towards the good alignment, as long as that works for the campaign. And I don't know much about specifics, but I'm really excited about magical classes. I think druids are really cool from what I've read, but they seem kind of complicated. I'm pretty open to your suggestions. For now, I would just think of a concept of what you would feel comfortable role-playing as. I think if you have a concept of a character, I can help with the mechanics. Don't worry so much about race and class yet until you see what the others in the party come to the table with. This game is a little more deadly than 5th edition, so certain classes are harder to play at first. For example, a wizard starts with 1 spell slot and 4 hit points at first level, so don't get too attached. This wasn't quite the response I expected, but I reasoned that he knew better than I did how this all worked. Plus, what little I did know was based on 5th edition, since that was more abundant, so I knew even less about 1st edition. The "don't get attached" threw me off, especially with how much he emphasized role-playing. For reference, one of my hobbies is creative writing, and making characters is probably my favourite part. I'm also the type of girl who apologizes to stuffed animals when they fall off my bed. I definitely get attached. Not to mention, I was already somewhat emotionally fragile at the time, and wasn't sure how I would take it if I put all this work into creating my first D&D character, only to have it all disappear. Despite the uneasy feeling, I told myself he was just trying to warn me and I should take his advice. So I vowed not to make a wizard and consider some of the other casters. I took his words to heart though, not focusing on the specific race or class and just trying to come up with a basic concept for a character I wanted to play. My final idea was relatively simple. My character would be a lass from a small town who always admired the powerful heroes she had heard stories about whilst growing up. When she discovered an aptitude for magic, she decided to strike out into the world to develop her skills and seek guidance from someone who knew more than she did. I planned to play her as a wide-eyed and innocent at the beginning, with a plan that the gritty adventure the DM had planned would lead to some character development as she learned the darker side of the magic she had idolized, and saw the world for what it really was. I figured her cluelessness and curiosity would be a good cover for my own. I left it there, as I didn't want to plan anything too specific until I talked with the DM at our session 0 and came up with more concrete character details. Finally, session 0 arrives. I hop into the voice chat a few minutes before we were set to start. People were already on the call and chatting, so I wait for a break in the conversation and say an enthusiastic hello. And I swear, I am not exaggerating when I say, the call fell silent. See, the rest of the party were all guys, and I guess they weren't expecting me to be a girl. I don't know if the DM hadn't realised I was a girl or just didn't mention it to the others. I never stated it outright because that would be super weird, and it just doesn't come up organically. But my name was in my email signature. It's not a common name, but it has a typically feminine ending. I knew that the D&D demographic was mainly guys, but I was blissfully unaware of exactly how bad certain things could get in these circles. So I didn't get why my hello had caused this extended, stunned silence. Eventually, someone broke it with a quick, "Hey," and they continued their previous conversation. I don't know who it was because none of them bothered to introduce themselves to me, but I won't do you the same disservice. Besides myself and the DM, the party consisted of rogue, fighter, and caster. I never did figure out his exact class, and I was never told that either. The chatting continued with no further acknowledgement to me, while I sat quietly and tried to follow what was going on. Since no one introduced themselves, I scrambled to write down their names as others addressed them so I could tie them to their usernames. Finally, it hit start time and the DM spoke up. I should also note that he addressed me solely by my username and never my real one, while he called the others by name. I wasn't really sure what to make of it at the time, but looking back, it makes me feel kind of uncomfortable. The DM had seen my name in my email. Then again, maybe he didn't? But it also could have just asked. And I know at least one of the other players was a random from the internet, though I wasn't sure which one. And it wasn't just that they all knew each other in real life. OP. Everyone already has their characters, so why don't you go ahead and roll yours up? Oh, okay. How do I do that? This was met with laughter from the rest of the party. Apparently, it was funny that I was a beginner who had never made a D&D character before, let alone on this program, and I didn't know how it worked. Or maybe I was the only one who had showed up without my character already made, despite the fact that I was just following what DM had told me to do. I immediately felt my cheeks heating up in embarrassment and was grateful that this wasn't a video call. Roll 4d6 and drop the lowest 6 times. How do I do that? Click on the d6. Where? More laughter ensued. I had finally found where to click to roll the dice, and I just pressed one at random. I was already too afraid to ask for the help that the DM had promised me. I really wanted these guys to like me, and I just felt like I was embarrassing myself with every word. No, that's the D8, and you need to roll 4. 6 sides, just count them. It's the normal die! There were more chuckles as I eventually figured it out. I didn't point out that the 2D image of the D6 actually only had 4 sides, or that I was new to all of this and had no clue what I was doing. I rolled my stats, which DM assigned me in order. I rolled decently well overall, with strength as my highest stat. And unfortunately, this is when even more of the DM's promises went out the proverbial window. These stats would be good for a fighter, and you should just be a human, since that will be easiest for you. I'll make your character and get you your starter equipment. I was rather confused. I had specifically told the DM that I wanted to do something with magic. I ended up with just about the least magical character possible, and I didn't even get a say in it. The call had only lasted a few minutes so far, but I was already exhausted and bewildered. I sat there helplessly, watching DM make my character in the program without asking me a single question. He entered my stats, gave me equipment, and even selected a picture without any input from me. A picture of a woman, scantily clad in typical video game logic, I fight in a metal whatever in heels, feminine armor. What? Why? Ew! One moment, please. Yeah, I am formally starting the puke counter with this episode. Fun fact, I am somewhat queasy about stuff like this, so I apologize for those in the audience who also feel nauseous about this kind of thing. Let's resume the story. The only thing he left blank was the name, which he told me to pick. The DM continued talking as I frantically tried to come up with a name, explaining that even though he said this was a session 0, since we were all ready to go, we might as well get started. Just as I typed in a random name, the DM put the focus back on me. We'll go around and describe your characters before we get started. OP, why don't you start? In that moment, my mind went blank. I had prepared a cursory backstory, sure, but it was supposed to be for some kind of caster, not a fighter. Now, obviously, I know that what I had was general enough that I could have easily adapted it, but at the time, I was so caught off guard that I couldn't think logically in that moment. Additionally, I didn't have anywhere near the amount of detail that I usually like my characters to have. I had planned on writing more between Session 0 and Session 1, once I knew more about what my build and the world looked like, and the DM knew that. I felt put on the spot. After longer than I would have liked, I finally managed to speak. I do not know. You don't know? So you're an amnesiac? Once again, the party laughed at my ignorance. At this point, I was getting frustrated, and I was too flustered not to let it show. Wait, no. Well then what's your backstory? Just give me a minute. Fine, we'll circle back. The DM went around to all of the others, who all gave a brief summary of the backstories they had actually had time to plan. When they eventually got back to me, I still didn't have anything. Honestly, I wasn't trying that hard. I had a feeling that anything I came up with would just end with them laughing at me again. It took all of 15 minutes for them to completely squash my excitement for this campaign. So I just gave in, and said that I would be an amnesiac, so I could let DM give me a backstory that wouldn't get me made fun of. With that, we began the campaign. DM told us that we were looking for a man as a favour for Fighter's uncle. There was no context for how the party met one another, or why it was we were all looking for this man. We managed to find the man in a tavern. He immediately said something rather cryptic, and just died. The rogue searched the body and found a map and a small pouch. Everyone began poring over the map, discussing what various things on it meant and what we should do next. And every time I tried to say anything, they talked over me or otherwise ignored me. At this point, I wasn't surprised by their behaviour. But the whole point of joining a D&D campaign was so that I could play D&D. While they were discussing the map, I cut in and told the DM that I wanted to look at the pouch. He told me that it was a bag of holding, with a ton of gold coins and valuable gems. This clearly piqued Rogue's interest. Despite neither the player or character paying me a single modicum of attention until this point, he suddenly broke off from the map brigade. What's in the bag? Oh, nothing, nothing? Serious, Ray? Roll a deception check for me. If they had let me finish speaking, they would have heard me say, nothing important. I was more interested in the map than the gold, but now that my character was finally being included, I would have happily handed the gold over. But my argument was ignored, like everything else I had said, and the DM had told me to roll deception. I did, and I actually rolled really well. Better than Rogue's insight. You believe her that there is nothing in the pouch, even as it jingles on her belt. I didn't want to put it on my belt. I just wanted to hear about the map before. Then why did you lie? I didn't mean. You rolled deception. You obviously want the gold for yourself. You don't even know there's gold, or that she lied. What do you do next? The rogue reluctantly dropped it, and went back to discussing the plan with the others. Honestly, I don't remember the rest of this part because I was completely and utterly left out of it. The fact that it was approaching midnight for me may have also contributed. The next thing I do remember, we were in a cave crawl. After a while of stealthing through dark tunnels, a giant worm creature suddenly dropped down from the ceiling. It immediately did a round of damage to me because, when asked, the rest of the party insisted I was in front. Fine, whatever, my character was hardy for level 1, and at least they were including me. We rolled initiative. I rolled well again. It was almost like the dice roller was taking pity on me, and I got to go second. The rogue was first, the fighter was third, and the caster was last. The combat essentially went like this. I throw a rock at it. A rock? You have a dagger. I know. I pick up a rock and throw it. Okay, roll to attack. Roll the natural, too. You grab a small rock off the ground and lob it at the worm, but it goes wide and misses the creature entirely. Maybe this was just a giggly group, because they laughed at this too. Apparently throwing a rock instead of an actual weapon was hilarious to these guys, but I wasn't in on the joke, nor was I made privy to it. OP, it's your turn. What do you do? I'll swing my sword at it. I rolled a total of 19. You hit. Roll your damage. As your sword cuts into the gelatinous body of this creature, you feel resistance as it absorbs some of the blow. The slime coating its body sprays with the force of your swing, and you feel flecks of acid burning at your skin. Fighter, your initiative. I hold my turn. Wait, what? Why? Should I have done that? No, you should keep attacking. I hold my turn. I could practically hear the smirk in his voice, but I didn't understand. The caster went next and cast some spell from afar, which didn't seem to do much but anger the worm. The next round of combat went exactly the same. Rogue tried to throw a rock instead of an actual weapon and missed badly. I attacked, the fighter held his turn, and caster did something that didn't actually work. The third round was exactly the same. The monster naturally attacked me on each of its turns, since I was the only one actually doing damage to it. Luckily, it didn't hit me every single time, or I would have gone down. I kept questioning what the others were doing, but they just told me to keep going. Eventually, I sliced the creature in twain, ending the combat. Your sword finally cuts through the creature, and it falls to the clay floor, below in 2 pieces. Its green blood splatters your face, and you take another 3 points of acid damage. Are you still up? Barely. As you catch your breath to recover from the battle, you wipe the blood from your sword and notice that the acidic slime has eaten away at the steel of your weapon. You will now have penalties to attack and damage rolls with that sword. What? I didn't know that could happen. What do I do? You can try to buy a new one when you get back to town, if you have the gold for it. You cannot use all that gold you stole without splitting it. That's not fair. How will I get through the cave now? It was my only weapon. Well, you should have a backup, or not use your only sword on a worm with acid damage. A small reminder that the DM chose my equipment for me in that same session. Exactly. The rest of us were smart and didn't risk our weapons or armor. I didn't know. You could have told me. No we couldn't. That would be metagaming. But couldn't we have run away from it? Even if it attacked as we left, it would have done less damage. No, we need the experience. It was our first battle. You can't just run from every battle. In that moment, my shame finally turned into anger. I didn't know much about this game, but I did know that it was supposed to be fun, and parties were supposed to work together. Now, I was stuck with a weaponless fighter I had never wanted to play in the first place, getting lectured about metagaming as if their characters could have possibly known the creature would damage their weapons before the first blow, and being told I can't run from battle when that is exactly what they did by letting me fight it for them. I was so fed up that I wanted to cry. What was supposed to be a fun release after some of the worst few months of my social life had turned into yet another situation where I was being bullied and belittled. Luckily, the DM called the session there, and I immediately got off the call so I could try to go to bed and forget about all of this. I was successful at neither of those. I didn't know what to do, but I knew for certain that I was dreading Session 2. The next morning, I reached out to a friend who was the one who got me into the concept of D&D in the first place. I told her what happened, and she advised me that this whole thing was not okay, and not what the game was supposed to be like. She helped me write what was essentially a resignation letter to send in the Discord. I felt guilty about quitting so soon when I had agreed to participate for the whole campaign, but I was close to panicking at the thought of another 3 hours of this nonsense. Besides, I wouldn't be much help to them in the upcoming sessions without any sort of weapon or spells. I didn't tell them exactly why I was quitting so soon, mostly citing the late hour of the sessions and stress about school. I thanked them for allowing me to join, but said I didn't feel it was a good fit. I sent the message, and about 10 seconds later, I was removed from the Discord, without so much as a reply. So yeah, long story, not so short, I don't know if it was because I was a new player, a girl, or both, but my first experience with D&D definitely put me off of it for a long time. The more I learned about it, the more I learned that things like this, and worse, are surprisingly common. I didn't want to put up with that, so I didn't seek out another group for a long time. There is a happy end to this story, in a way. After months of getting my fix through podcasts and trying to teach myself the rules, I managed to put together a group out of people from my university and some old friends. It has been over 2 years since then, and whilst some players have come and gone, the core group is still going, even through the pandemic, and us all moving to different states. My experience has been totally different with this new group, as even with multiple new players, no one has ever talked down to or been made fun of, beyond some light-hearted teasing that is typical for our friend group. We even have a running joke that you're officially a D&D player when you ask what a D6 is because you've forgotten about normal dice. And most importantly, we actually have fun. We currently alternate between 2 campaigns, and I actually DM one of them. We are getting close to finishing them both, and I can't wait to see what we do next in our stories. And that's the end of this story. Wow. I don't think it is an exaggeration to say that the initial group the poster found online was nothing short of a completely toxic mess. From the Dungeon Master lying about the premise of the campaign being beginner friendly, to the constant metagaming and bullying aspects, this group by itself would have been really bad, even for veteran players, and I'm honestly surprised it was even remotely stable to begin with. If a new player is at the table, that's something that should be celebrated. There's a new person who is genuinely trying to get into the hobby, and they most likely will not know the finer details on the aspects of play for tabletop role-playing. So it hurts double when the DM lies about the premise for the campaign being beginner-friendly and willing to help the newcomer when they do the exact opposite of that when the campaign begins in Session 0. And no, it stops being a Session 0 when it starts becoming a Session 1. At the core of the story, we also have the issues caused by the party opting to metagame to the dismay of the poster. If the group had attempted to make a knowledge check on the worm creature with the acid blood, that would be a good starting point for getting in-character information. If anyone in the group then spent an action speaking up about not attacking it with melee, that also would have circumvented the issue. Maybe. Because it would have hurt to take 10 seconds to say, "Don't attack this thing with melee," to the newcomer. Instead, the entire group opted to use metagaming as a means to bully the poster, who was a new player, with no prior experience. And even if that prior experience was there, leaning on that is also a form of metagaming. Being able to separate in character and out of character is a crucial skill, and this group used that to belittle the poster. This bullying and belittling is also pronounced with the rather inappropriate picture used for the poster's character, which makes me feel queasy merely thinking about. This sort of behaviour, in my opinion, isn't just derogatory towards women, but also derogatory towards men, because it portrays guys such as myself in a rather negative shade. If anything, this makes a point about how much respect has to be valued at not just the table, but also away from the table as well. I have a strong suspicion that it would have been a matter of when and not if that particular group would bully and belittle newcomers to the hobby of tabletop role-playing. It's clear to me that the group consisted of gatekeeping veterans, intent on their game of deception and meta. And if that's the kind of group they want, they shouldn't go around saying that they are beginner-friendly. So kudos to the original poster for getting help from a good friend and finding a good group to play with, and for getting out of that bad situation. And for the inexperienced players out there, if you find yourself in a similar situation to the poster of today's story, leave and try to find an alternate group that won't bully you. There should be no place for belittlement, but every place should have support for their fellow players, especially if they are new. Before we end today's narration, I have received my first bit of fan art from the community of artists, and as such, the Institute has deigned to open the Fan Art Corner! For the inauguration of the Fan Art Corner, we are graced by 13th Syndicate, with a fantastic sketch depicting the early days of training with Aquata, my familiar, with him coming in to land on my arm. I really love how happy the sketch makes everything, and it genuinely brings a smile with how wholesome it is. Thank you very much, 13th Syndicate, for sending in your fan art. If you wish to see your fan art featured in the Fan Art Corner, be sure to send it to the email in my About section. Fan art is always inspirational, and it means a lot that I can inspire artists to create awesome depictions such as this. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe and leave a like. It's free to do, and you can change your mind later. If you have any thoughts on this story or feedback on how it can improve, feel free to leave a comment. Again, thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you all next time.